The kettle never boiled that morning. She turned it on like she always did, with that distant, distracted grace she reserved for appliances and strangers, and then she left the kitchen. It screamed, hissed, clicked off. No one came. I stood there in the hallway, listening to it whistle into silence while she sat on the couch scrolling through her phone, smirking at something she'd never show me. That was the exact moment I knew. I was done being furniture. Not because of something she said. Not because she cheated, though I'll get to that. But because she didn't even hear the water boiling. Because I wasn't even worth a turned head. I didn't leave with rage. I didn't slam doors. I didn't shout or break things or beg her to notice me. I just went quiet. And then I disappeared. No letter. No forwarding address. Just one sticky note left on the fridge with 3 words. The kettle boiled. She didn't understand it. Not at first. But I bet it haunts her now. I've seen the aftermath. Mutuals messaging me. My old boss calling. Her friends posting cryptic stories on Instagram like we had a tragic love story, when all we had was a slow collapse and a missing person report. The thing is, she doesn't know the half of it. She doesn't know I saw the photos. She doesn't know I heard her that night in the garage, laughing on speakerphone, whispering, "He's too passive to ever leave." She doesn't know where I went. And she has no idea what I've learned since I left. But she's looking. Oh God, she's looking. And when she finally finds me, if she does, she'll wish she had just listened to that kettle. It had been months since she last parked in the garage. Sheridan said the motor was making a weird noise, and she didn't want to deal with car drama before work, so she started parking on the street. I offered to take a look at it, twice, and both times she waved me off like a child tugging at her sleeve during a phone call. But 2 nights before I vanished, I went out there. Not because I was suspicious. Not yet. I was looking for my old toolbox. Thought I might fix the cabinet hinge she kept complaining about. Ironic now, right? The moment I stepped into the garage, the air felt heavier. Not musty, not dusty. Used. The passenger side of her car was open, like it had just been slammed shut too hard and didn't catch. There was a faint citrus scent, expensive perfume I didn't recognize, and a crumpled receipt on the floor mat. I picked it up. It was for a hotel downtown. 2 nights ago. 1 king bed. Champagne add-on. I just stood there staring at it, barely blinking. Not surprised. That wasn't the emotion. I was confirmed. That quiet, breathless type of confirmation you feel when all the doubt finally folds into a neat, sharp corner. I didn't say a word to her that night. I couldn't. Not because I was scared, though maybe part of me was, but because I had already begun detaching. Silently. Carefully. Like removing a plug from a socket and watching the lights dim without a sound. The next morning, I went back into the garage while she was in the shower. I opened her car's glove compartment. Inside, tucked beneath a manila envelope of insurance papers and a broken pen, was a second phone. It wasn't locked. And that's when the flood came. Messages with saved contact names like Jen Cherry Blossom and Val from Yoga, all carefully coded, I assume. But the texts made it clear none of them were women. The language was too visceral, too direct. One of them said, "You still owe me that night at the cabin. I'm not sharing you again unless he's really gone." I remember feeling sick. Like, stomach punched, cold sweat, can't swallow kind of sick. I sat on the garage floor for 10 full minutes, trying not to dry heave. Then I placed the phone right back where I found it. Not because I was afraid she'd know I saw it, but because I didn't want her to feel anything. No confrontation. No drama. No relief. Just nothing. That was the moment the idea planted itself like a root in my chest. Not divorce. Not revenge. Vanishing. Not to punish her. She wasn't worth my punishment. But to reclaim the only power I had left. Absence. I would no longer be the soft place she ignored, the placeholder she returned to, the name she forgot to say in public. And so I began preparing. Quietly. Methodically. She still doesn't know I found the phone. But it's haunting her now. You can tell by how many people she's contacted since I left. Mutuals. Neighbors. Old friends we haven't spoken to in years. Her posts online went from vague, "I miss you" quotes to full-blown desperate reach-outs like, "If anyone knows where Callum is, please tell him I'm sorry. I just want to talk." She doesn't know I read every single one of them. I created a fake account just to watch her unravel from a safe distance. But she doesn't know the full truth yet, because she only saw one phone. There was a second, and that one holds everything. It was in the drawer beneath her vanity, tucked behind an old curling iron she never used anymore, wrapped in a velvet sunglasses pouch, like it was some sacred object. I wasn't even looking for it, not really. I was moving things around, packing slowly, quietly, deliberately, when I felt the weight of it shift under my palm. That smooth, rectangular resistance that immediately tells your fingertips, this isn't supposed to be here. I pulled it out and just stared at it. No case, no stickers, just a plain, matte black burner phone. Clean, cold. The moment I powered it on, I felt something twist in my stomach. Not just nerves, but a rising certainty that this wasn't going to be like the first phone. This one didn't belong to someone playing the game of secrecy. This phone was the game. No lock screen, no passcode, just instant access. That was my first red flag. Sheridan never left anything unlocked. Not her phone, not her diary, not even the bathroom door when she brushed her teeth. So why would this one be wide open? The call log was nearly empty, just a few recurring numbers, all labeled with codes like C2, driver Alt, J. No texts, no social apps, no photos, just one app installed, an encrypted messenger I didn't recognize. When I opened it, there were only 4 conversations. But those 4 felt like dynamite packed into silence. One of the threads was a series of audio files. Short ones, whispered voices, no names, just timestamps. I listened to one. Her voice, barely audible, shaking a little. He still hasn't figured it out. But I can't keep lying to him. Not after what happened with the lake house. The lake house. We never had one. We couldn't even afford a timeshare, let alone a second home. So whose was it? The second audio message was from a man. I didn't recognize the voice. He said, "If he starts digging, you know what to do. He's passive, but he's not stupid." That's a dangerous combination. That line stuck in my brain like a nail. You know what to do. What the hell did that mean? Was this about money? Cheating? Or something worse? I didn't listen to the third audio. I couldn't. My hands were shaking too badly, and I suddenly felt like someone was watching me through the crack in the bathroom door. The house was empty. Sheridan was at yoga. But still, my instinct screamed, put it back. So I did. I slid it back into its pouch, closed the drawer, walked away, but something had shifted in me. Before, I'd been planning to leave out of heartbreak, out of invisibility, out of emotional collapse. Now, I wasn't just leaving, I was running. Because this wasn't just an affair. It was something else. I didn't know what yet, but I knew one thing. Whatever she was involved in, it was planned, precise, executed in shadows. And I had been sitting at the center of it for God knows how long, blindfolded by my own denial, kept docile by her soft voice and colder hands. And here's the sick part. I still loved her. Even as I folded my clothes into my old duffel bag, even as I mapped out the roads I'd take to disappear, I still imagined her waking up one day, realizing what she lost, and falling to her knees in some kind of epiphany. Pathetic, right? But that's the thing about men like me. We don't leave because we stop loving them. We leave because we finally realize they stopped loving us long before. The second phone was never meant to be found. But it changed everything. And she has no idea I ever touched it. Not yet. But she will. Oh, she will. There was no lake house. At least, not one I ever knew about. But that didn't mean it didn't exist. The next morning, while Sheridan was still asleep, curled up on the edge of the bed like she was afraid to share space with me, I quietly slid her key ring from the entryway hook and stepped outside to check the glove box again. This time, I searched slower, more intentionally. Beneath the insurance folder, tucked behind a crumpled granola bar wrapper, I found it, a folded brochure. Lake Sheridan Getaway Cabins, discreet, quiet, remote. It wasn't even hidden, almost like she wanted me to find it, or forgot it was there. I unfolded it with slow, careful fingers. On the back was a handwritten phone number and 2 words in all caps. Don't charge. That was the first time I felt genuine fear. Not jealousy. Not sadness. Fear. Why would someone write that? Who was it for? Why did she care so much that nothing get traced? I took a photo of the number with my burner phone and put the brochure back exactly where I found it. If I'd learned anything from the second phone, it was this. She was watching more than I realized. If I let her suspect for even a second that I was catching on, the rules of this game would change fast, and not in my favor. That afternoon, I called the number from a payphone outside a gas station 20 miles away. I gave a fake name. Told them I'd like to book the same cabin my wife stayed in recently. There was a long pause on the other end. Then a man said, "Is this for the same arrangement?" I froze. I said yes, whatever that meant. He gave me a code, Dove 6. No explanation. No confirmation email. Just a verbal note that someone would meet me at the gate after 11 p.m. That was it. I hung up, stared at the receiver for a full minute. The sun was setting behind the trees, casting a blood-orange glow across the gravel parking lot. For the first time in weeks, I realized my hands were shaking. I still didn't know what she was doing, but I knew one thing for certain. It wasn't just cheating. There was an arrangement, a protocol, a system, and I was either collateral damage or a decoy. When I got home that night, Sheridan was already in bed, face down, phone glowing beneath the pillow. She didn't look up, didn't ask where I'd been. She never did anymore. I stood there in the dark bedroom for a long time, just watching her breathe, wondering how many versions of her existed that I never met. And then I did something I hadn't done in months. I kissed her forehead. She stirred for a second, not because of the kiss, but because the screen beneath her shifted and made a notification sound. She grunted, rolled over, buried the phone deeper under the pillow. That's when I saw it. A text preview. Everything in place for tomorrow. Dove 6 confirmed. I didn't sleep that night. I laid awake beside her, heart racing, mind unraveling. Whatever this was, whatever she was, it had already moved beyond betrayal. This was a stage performance. I was the oblivious actor trapped in Act 3 while she was already taking bows backstage. But here's the thing about pretending. Eventually, the curtain always falls. And when it does, everyone sees who was lying and who was just too dumb to know better. Except I wasn't dumb anymore. I had the code. I had the address. And I was going to that lake house. Not for answers. For evidence. Because if she was going to burn everything we had to the ground, I was at least going to hold the match when it happened. I arrived just after 11:10 p.m. The road to Lake Sheridan wasn't marked on any modern GPS. I had to trace it off an old fishing forum and a blurry Facebook photo of a ranger's map someone had posted 5 years ago. It was gravel, full of switchbacks, and completely swallowed by trees that felt like they leaned in the further you drove. It had rained earlier that evening, and mist clung to the road like smoke from a fire that hadn't finished burning. I drove with my headlights off for the last quarter mile. The gate was open. No one met me. That should have been the first sign. Cabin Dove 6 was tucked at the far end of the property, right against the water. Isolated. Not like the other cabins I passed, which were well lit and looked like they were actually meant for people. This one, it looked like it had been forgotten on purpose. The porch light was dim and flickering, and the window shutters were nailed down from the outside, like it wanted to keep whatever was inside in. I sat in my car for a full 5 minutes before I stepped out. The silence was thick. Too thick. Even the frogs had shut up. When I walked up the porch stairs, the boards groaned louder than I expected. The door wasn't locked. In fact, it opened a little before I even touched the knob, like it had been resting against the frame. The air inside smelled of wet wood, faint bleach, and something else. Something metallic. I told myself it was just the pipes. But then I saw it, the first photo. It was sitting on a desk by the far window, lit only by the soft, blue moonlight filtering through the trees. It was a printed photo of me, taken from behind, at work, fixing the grinder in that same cafe I mentioned earlier. There was a date stamped on the bottom. 3 months ago. Underneath, it was another. This time, me and Sheridan at the farmer's market last spring. She was laughing. I had just bought her sunflowers. It was one of the last good days I could remember. The third photo made my blood run cold. It wasn't of me. It was of her, but not like I'd ever seen her. Sheridan, sitting on a bed I didn't recognize, in that same red dress she wore the night she left in the black car. Her head was turned, laughing at someone out of frame. One hand was around a wine glass. The other was holding something else. A knife. I froze. My throat locked. I wanted to turn around, to leave, but something in me, something twisted and stupid and starved for answers, made me keep looking. In the drawer beneath the desk were pages of what looked like reports. Not love letters. Not secret rendezvous schedules. Reports. My name at the top of several. Observations. Logs. Timelines. Places I'd been. Conversations I'd had. Even my habits. How long I brushed my teeth. Which days I forgot to take my keys. When I left my wallet behind at the gym. Whoever had written these knew me better than I knew myself. There was a line scrawled across one of the pages, underlined 3 times in red pen. Subject has not yet deviated. Emotional responses remain consistent. No threat. Subject. That was me. I wasn't a husband. I was an experiment. I was being watched, tracked, documented like a lab rat. The audio messages, the burner phone, the fake names, the lake house brochure. It all clicked at once like dominoes falling in reverse. I staggered back from the desk, my breath sharp, heartbeat pounding in my ears. I had to leave. I had to get out of there before whatever this was became something I couldn't walk away from. As I turned to leave, I saw headlights flash through the trees. Someone was coming. I killed the lantern and crouched beside the door, barely daring to breathe. A car pulled up, slow, crunching gravel under its tires. The engine idled for a few seconds, then shut off. A door opened. Footsteps. Soft, deliberate, familiar. Then, a voice. Her voice. She was humming. A lullaby. The same one she used to hum when she couldn't sleep. And that's when I realized. She wasn't here to meet someone. She was here to clean up. I didn't move. Not when she stepped onto the porch. Not when the old floorboards creaked beneath her boots. Not even when the doorknob turned slowly and the light from her phone spilled into the room like a narrow spotlight, sweeping across the dusty floorboards and catching the edges of the photos I'd left slightly out of place on the desk. I was crouched behind the old wardrobe, one hand covering my mouth, the other gripping the side of a loose panel that I had pulled from the inner wall in case I needed something, anything, to swing with. I wasn't thinking clearly anymore. This wasn't about heartbreak. This wasn't about infidelity. This was survival now, plain and simple. She entered the cabin like she had done it before. No hesitation. No glancing around. Just walked in and closed the door behind her with a soft, almost reverent click. She moved straight to the desk, phone still in hand, and froze. Her shoulders stiffened. I could tell she noticed the shift, the slightly crooked drawer, the pages moved. Maybe even the warmth still lingering in the air from my breath. She whispered something I couldn't hear. And then she laughed. Quiet. Cold. A laugh I didn't recognize. Not the woman who used to slow dance with me barefoot in the kitchen. Not the woman who pretended to like the same sad indie movies just to hold my hand in the theater. No, this laugh belonged to someone else. Someone trained. And then she said my name. Not like she was calling out to me, but like she was confirming something to herself. Callum, she whispered, almost admiringly, like she'd just read my name in a file she thought was long lost. You really shouldn't have come here. I felt my stomach drop. My knees were locked. Every cell in my body was screaming to run, but I stayed still. She was standing 6 feet away, and I realized she wasn't looking around for me. She knew I was there. I told them you were predictable, she continued, still facing the desk, her voice calm like she was reading bedtime stories to the dark. But they didn't believe me. They said you were too quiet, too simple, too weak. But I told them. I said, give him time, he'll show up right where I need him to. And here you are. I pressed my back harder against the wall. My breathing was silent now, not because I was good at hiding, but because I was too terrified to draw a breath. My hand tightened around the wooden plank. She moved slowly toward the bed, dragging her fingers across the headboard, then knelt to the floor, lifted one of the wooden slats beneath the mattress, and pulled out a thick black envelope. She didn't open it, just looked at it for a long moment, then placed it gently on the bed. They'll be here soon, she said softly. You should probably make a decision before then. She stood, checked her reflection in the dark window, fixing her hair like she was preparing for a date, and then walked toward the door. But just before she stepped outside, she paused, tilted her head, smiled, and said, you were always better at disappearing than fighting. Don't disappoint me now. Then she left, door still open behind her, and I stood there, frozen, drenched in sweat, heart hammering like a war drum in my chest, wondering what the hell she meant by they. I waited 10 seconds, then 20, then I ran. I didn't take the envelope. I didn't look back. I bolted through the side of the cabin, through the woods, scraping my face and arms on branches, stumbling over roots, until I hit the road and sprinted barefoot to where I'd parked my car, half a mile back in the trees. I didn't stop until the car doors were locked and the engine was roaring. Tires spun gravel into the night as I tore away from that cursed cabin and that woman I thought I once knew. I didn't sleep that night. I kept driving until the sun came up. And when it did, I had only one thought left in my mind. If she knew I was there, then she must have let me go. Which meant this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I didn't go home. I couldn't. Home meant routine, traceable habits, known places, patterns. And I finally understood, whatever Sheridan was part of, they didn't need to chase me. They just needed to wait. Because I was predictable, a creature of grief and denial who always circled the same drain. But not this time. I drove 4 hours east to a cheap roadside motel with flickering signs and no surveillance. Paid cash. Gave a fake name. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my hands, trying to ground myself in reality, but my hands didn't look like mine anymore. They were trembling, pale, untrustworthy. I opened the burner phone I had used to take photos at the cabin, scrolled through the grainy pictures of the documents. I zoomed in, line by line, slowly, painfully. Most of it was coded, written in acronyms and shorthand I didn't understand, but then I saw it. A name, scrawled in blue ink in the margin. Not mine, not Sheridan's. Just one word, Wes. No last name, no title, no description. But under it, in parentheses, handler, authorized level, for intervention. I didn't know what the hell that meant, but it didn't sound like a boyfriend. It sounded like an operative. And suddenly, all those little moments made sense. The encrypted messenger, the burner phone, the surveillance logs, the lake house protocol. This wasn't cheating. This wasn't even blackmail. It was a project, and I was the subject. I remembered something Sheridan said to me once, long before things went bad. It was a throwaway comment I didn't think twice about at the time. We were watching some spy thriller, and she said, "You know, it's not that hard to manipulate someone if you already live inside their routine." I thought it was just sarcasm, a jab at my predictable mornings, my identical lunch orders. But now I saw it for what it really was. A test, a clue, a joke at my expense. I couldn't stop thinking about the envelope on the bed. What was in it? Money? Instructions? A passport? Something told me it wasn't meant for her. It was a handoff. And I had walked in on the moment between two acts of a play I was never meant to see. I didn't sleep. Couldn't. I stayed awake all night running through everything, connecting dots that I wished didn't connect so cleanly. The affair was just the bait. The real operation was deeper, buried under the layers of emotional decay she had so carefully engineered. And I let it happen because I mistook indifference for fatigue, coldness for stress, detachment for independence. And now here I was, in a motel with blood on my arms from the woods, bruises I hadn't noticed, and no one I could call without putting them in danger. Not even my sister. Especially not my sister. At 4:03 a.m., someone knocked on my door. 3 taps. A pause. 2 more. I didn't answer. I held my breath and waited. No voice. No footsteps. Just silence. When I finally cracked the blinds, there was nothing but an empty hallway and a single manila envelope sitting on the doormat, identical to the one I'd seen at the cabin. No name. No markings. Just a short line scrawled in red Sharpie on the back. You were never the only subject. My throat dried. I picked it up with shaking hands and backed into the room, bolting the door behind me. I stared at the envelope for what felt like an hour before finally peeling it open. Inside were photographs. One of me at a gas station the day before. One of me parked outside the cabin. One of me leaving the motel lobby earlier that night. And one more. Not of me. Of my sister. She was at her job, standing behind the bakery counter, smiling at a customer, completely unaware someone was watching her, documenting her, the same way they had watched me. There was a sticky note attached to that photo. Just 2 words, all caps. Stay gone. That's when I knew. This wasn't about Sheridan anymore. It wasn't about love, or betrayal, or even control. This was about data, manipulation, strategy. I wasn't the victim of a failed marriage. I was part of something designed to fall apart from the start. And Wes, whoever he was still out there, watching, waiting to see if I'd break script. But I wasn't broken. Not yet. I didn't open the curtains for hours. The envelope sat on the motel bed like a living thing, heavy with everything I didn't want to know. But something had shifted in me overnight. Maybe it was the photo of my sister. Maybe it was the sticky note telling me to stay gone. Maybe it was just exhaustion. But for the first time in months, I stopped feeling like prey and started feeling like a person again. I realized something simple and obvious. The whole game only worked because I kept playing. They had been mapping my routines, my emotional loops, my patterns. If I broke the pattern completely, not just by disappearing, but by changing who I was, they would lose the signal. They couldn't manipulate what they couldn't predict. So I did the only thing that would scare them more than my absence. I chose a future of my own making. I drove through the night until the sun came up. I crossed into a different state, ditched the burner phone in a river, and bought a bus ticket under a completely new name. I left the envelope with the motel manager and told him to mail it to a box in a town nobody had ever heard of. I texted my sister from a secure app for the first time in weeks. Just one line. I'm okay. Don't worry. Change your routines. Don't trust Sheridan. She replied with a heart and a question mark. That was enough for now. When the bus finally pulled away, I looked out at the horizon and felt a strange lightness. No fear, no dread, just a clean, empty page. My entire life had been built around waiting for someone else to change, waiting for Sheridan to love me again, waiting for a sign that I mattered. All the while, I had been training myself to stay small, to stay predictable. They had counted on that. But I wasn't small anymore. I wasn't predictable anymore. Over the next months, I built a new existence piece by piece. New job in a coastal town fixing fishing equipment, cash only. New apartment. New morning ritual, running by the sea instead of making coffee for someone who no longer cared. I learned to cook for myself. I made friends. I stopped scrolling through Sheridan's social media. I stopped looking back. One day, a letter arrived at my P.O. box. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper with just 3 words. Protocol terminated. Free. I stared at it for a long time, then laughed, really laughed, for the first time in years. Whoever Wes was, whatever the experiment had been, it was over. Maybe they decided I was no longer useful. Maybe they finally understood that a man who chooses his own life can't be manipulated. Either way, they let go. I walked out of the post office into the bright afternoon and realized I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't scared. I wasn't even curious. The mystery didn't own me now. It had been replaced by something bigger, freedom. Sheridan was still out there somewhere. Maybe she was still looking. Maybe she wasn't. But for the first time, that was no longer my story to follow. My story was here, on this street, in this sunlight, in this breath I was taking without permission or supervision. I had vanished without a word. She had desperately looked for me, but I had finally found myself. And that was the only ending I needed.